Okay, but I do need questions from you guys. Now, export is the topic of today, and there's a lot of lectures in there already. So I'm going to go over what I want you to know from those lectures, and then we're going to want to start to talk about the problems and stuff like that related to exporting. So I want your guys' problems, not mine. I want to hear what you guys have coming on. So let's start looking at some questions. Oh, nobody's pushing comments through. Okay. All right, guys, it is going to be a little quiet today. I'm going to push comments through. And we'll go from there. Okay, let's see. Hamdi's, I'm honestly not sure how to feel about that. Part of me feels a bit of burnout after what's like 3 months and others. Yeah, get a run over the new feature soon from the ZBW team. Okay. Okay. Preacher, you can ask a question about the materials. And Alvaro, I have a chance to get 3ds Max instead of Maya. Are there any significant differences? Is one better than the other? Oof, Maya or Max? It's really hard to say. I'm a Max person, so that's where I'm at with it. In terms of which one's better or not, I mean, they're both owned by the same company. They both have a very similar tool set, just different different ways of accessing, the tool set. They both have particles, and in all actuality, a lot of this hasn't changed for like 10 years. I mean, things have advanced. Fluid dynamics is new, but particle systems, instancing, the way these things happen is relatively old school. The only variable I can think of is at 3ds Max. There's a lot of environment tutorials. There's a lot of environment work related to that. But every company I know of is platform agnostic for the most part. And what they do is build their own. They build tools that plug into things. So if you are a 3D Studio Max person, they'll either have something that plugs 3D Studio Max into their pipeline, or they'll give you time to learn. You're hired for your art, not your button-pushing abilities. At least that's the way you want it. Don't get hired for your button-pushing abilities. That's not a position of strength. You want to be hired for your artistic eye, for your ability to do something quickly, and your pleasant personality. Jeremy is saying he uses Maya. Lightwave is not used in very many studios. It's just, I think, Zoic. Modo, I would definitely recommend getting your head around that if you're interested. It's easier than Maya. Maya's a beast. Modo is going to be a little bit more on the concept art, a little bit more on the like toy sculpting, a little bit more on the small scale stuff. And I don't mean by small scale, I mean stuff you and I would normally do. Maya is really designed as what they call a hub application. It's designed to just do a ton of stuff. Particles, animation, all of that. Modo is really focused on rendering, dealing with your model, polygon tool set, stuff like that. Here's a note from Jacob. Alvaro, Maya is what we don't actually prefer anything. I mean, I use whatever the artists use. But if we do anything internal, it's Maya, because that's my background. I'm able to QC everything, and I know whether it's good or bad. So we need some material questions. We need some export questions. What are the biggest problems you have exporting? Who's exported displacement maps? Renato, what kind of problems do you have with maps? Laszlo, I have problems with exporting displacement maps. Do you have a specific thing that you can say? And Frank is asking for the sculpting program that renders from pictures that was discussed earlier in the classes. Wow. I do not know, Frank. Sculpting program that renders from pictures. Give me a little more information. I don't know what that means, renders from pictures, but is a sculpting. Alright, so now in your projects, there is a live demonstration of, I think, exporting your maps to Maya, your displacement maps to Maya. So that one is there, and I can go over that real quickly. Create a map from the pictures that could be exported to ZBrush. Yeah. I'm sorry, Frank. I'm just drawing a blank. Could be all the things going on and my brain is not what it could be. It would create a map from the pictures that could be exported to ZBrush. Okay. I'll keep thinking if I can think of what that is you're referring to. Or if anybody else is, let me know. Just post it. Okay, so displacement maps, normal maps, these are all potentially problems. One of the problems that we have when we're exporting is dealing with topology. So let's talk, in the absence of a very specific workflow from you guys, there's a couple of things that, a couple of directions or things that we need to kind of be mindful of. So right off the bat, of course, there is displacement maps. And instead of showing this on a really awesome model, what I'll probably do is show you on something that's more of a diagnostic type model. There's a particular way that we can kind of do this. We have to understand, we have to know a lot about the models. Well, there's a lot of things that can go wrong in displacement maps. Okay, let's clear that. So we have maps, you have topology, you have UVs. These are really what we're getting out of ZBrush. We're getting topology, which is the mesh. We're getting maps that contain high-res info, and we're getting UVs that are basically the how would we say it? They are the they're the connection. They're the connection between maps and the mesh. So these are the tools we're going to look at when we deal with high-res, or when we deal with maps and exporting. But there's a couple of problems that we kind of have to keep in mind. Let me just push some of these comments through. One of the problems that we have to deal with is in areas like this, thin areas, wispy areas off to the side. we have to deal with hard edges. Hard edges are a real big problem when you're dealing with displacement maps. And generally not something you want a displacement map to do. You want a displacement map to do contours and kind of inside stuff. So thin areas, edges, these are potential problem areas. These are things that you need to fix in what? In topology. So if you've got a thin area, you need to make sure that you have topology to kind of support that. If you've got an edge, you need to make sure that you've got topology to support that, right? But now if we're dealing with maps, maps are going to be things like these, this kind of bumpy surface. That's all a map. That's also a normal map. And again, UVs are the things that are going to connect that. So what are the issues that we face in terms of UVs? Anybody know? So let's talk about UVs and the issues that we're going to face there. Seams, overlap, and stretching. Right. So these are all the issues that we have to face, and we need tools to make sure we understand, how we can kind of work with it. For example, I think I laid out this model as UVs. Yeah, I did. So let's just morph the UVs for this one. And you can probably see, but there's some problems right here where they're overlapping each other. And so in terms of the normal map and the displacement map, this is going to cause some pretty significant issues. There's more issues too. Notice that there's this extreme blocking in some areas and then less so in others. Extreme blocking and then less so in others. Anybody know what creates that difference? Why would I get extreme blocking in one area or smoothness in another area? We're going to tackle that overlap soon. But I want to see if you can kind of help me diagnose why some of it is blocky and some of it is smooth. I mean, to be honest, it looks all of it looks blocky. But here in these little tiny sections, it's just very small. So why am I getting this kind of hardcore blockiness? All right, let's keep that in our minds, see if we can figure that out. Let's see if we can actually trace one of those back. No, it's not going to let us. Okay, let's keep that in our mind and let's talk about this overlap. See if we can kind of understand why that's happening. Now, this topology was done using UV master, and let's just go through how this topology was done. So we've got the original sculpt with the hair. No, the original sculpt with the hair down here. Let's take a look at that hair. That hair is done all with these curved tubes kind of pulled out and very crazy like. Obviously not something that we're going to we're going to deal with, we're going to be able to export very easily. So these guys get combined via Dynamesh into one mesh that then is projected and also sculpted and refined and kind of worked from there. But one of the things that we worry about when we divide or start to kind of level up the model is whether SMT is on or off, and also whether SUV is on. So these are kind of part of our production consideration. They're things that we need to be kind of mindful of. If you have SMT off, it can create kind of problems later on in your displacement maps. It can, and create some of that kind of staccato cubiness that we were seeing. I don't know if I had SMT. Yeah, I think that was on. But we had this, and then once we had this kind of setup with this high dense Dynamesh, then it was Z-remeshed and resculpted. So now the topology, if we go down, you can see is much more organized. But it's also got areas where, like for example right here, it's got this hole in the center and no clear boundary to say, well, this is one thing or another. That is actually one of the sources of our problem right there. This guy right here, that's going to cause an overlap. Any of these things going to cause overlaps? Not really. Let's see if there's anything here. And let's look. I don't know if you can see this, but it looks like there's a darker line right there. Looks like there's a darker line. I'm going to push some of these comments through. That darker line is actually potentially a problem. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll go in with the move brush, lower my draw size, and see if I can move things around. And did you catch that? You see how that's one vertice that's kind of overlapping or doing some strange things. Right in this area, because it was slightly higher, it looks like I've got some competing UVs, or competing edges, basically. That's going to be a problem. And now Z-Remesher is the one who did this, you know, but it is also possible that Dynamesh had this kind of setup. So let's zoom back. And there we go. Let's take a look at this Dynamesh model. This is going to be really hard to look at, because it's a little bit on the crazy side. But let's try to see if we can kind of polish this off, and we're going to polish by, let's go. So did Z-Remesher create this problem, or did it just inherit a problem from Dynamesh? Let's look. Looks like Dynamesh has done an okay job, no overlapping UVs, but it does look. Let me just wait for my screen to update to you guys. It does look like this area is the same area that had problems with Z-Remesher. Let me push some comments through. So I would say it's possible that Dynamesh created this problem. But the more likely culprit is that ZBrush or ZRemesher just didn't know what to do with this Dynamesh topology. It got itself kind of confused, and so the topology that it created just didn't have everything organized. So you got to keep an eye out for stuff like that in these automatic solutions. Doesn't mean that they're a guarantee, and these are the kinds of problems that can kind of kill you in the end. So how do we solve this problem? This one. How do we solve that topology? That little problem. Let's make sure. Is that where that problem is? It's kind of mixed up down in both areas. Anybody know? Okay. So the way you're going to solve this, you could quite possibly Z-remesh this again. In fact, I'm going to clone this so it's its own subtool. I'm going to delete higher resolutions, and I'm just going to Z-remesh that. Because all I want to do is see if I can solve that problem. Hold on one sec. Look at that. I Z-remeshed the low res. Instead of Z-remeshing a higher res and asking it to shrink it down by half or do the adaptive skin, things like that. So what does this tell us with Z-remesher? Thanks, Sona. Preacher's got it. Do it twice. Doesn't hurt, right? So if you do it twice, then you get it thinking on multiple levels and, as our famous character says, in multiple dimensions. So this is a good little quick little thing to figure that out, but we still have a remaining problem, right? What the heck are we going to do with the UVs here? And not only that, but look, put another hole in there. What is going on with that? It's nice though. I mean, if I was 3D printing this, it'd be cool to have that level of detail. But how are you going to UV this? Let's get to that. While I'm waiting for your answer, I think Joaquim's got a great question. Why doesn't Z-remesher do it twice with one click then? The truth is, Joaquim, we do not know how many times it actually does it. It could redo it. It could do it twice. But that's not really... there's a couple of things to keep in mind. So what Z-remesher does is it goes from high to new plus lower. High to new topo plus lower topo. You could add in, like basically have it loop around like that, but for the first iteration of the software, that would deny you the chance to know how the software and how that algorithm really behaves. So it would make sense from a software perspective, as long as the behavior was, 60 to 80% good, that you would not, have it automatically do that. I say do it as a best practice. But for right now, and in a lot of cases, you're not going to need that. I mean, the reason we have to do it is that hair is coming in like this. It's all kind of crazy. And for a lot of models, that's not going to be needed. Especially also their test models. And on from there. So let's get back to UVs for this guy, this girl. So notice that one of the things I am doing is just smoothing the model out. I am looking for where these problems are going to be. And I know exactly what's going to cause problems with the UVs. It's these holes. It's not rocket science, right? I mean, that's exactly what that does. It causes these problems. So before I answer this, I want to get an answer from you guys. How am I going to solve these UVs, this UV issue, without going into, let's say, Hedis, sorry, that's an ancient one, without going into UV on layout or Maya or something like that? So Preacher's saying you've got, you can fill the holes. Sure, you can, but that gets around what we're trying to do. So if we're exporting it to another app, we got to worry about these things. Then let's just look at a few of the UV Master tools that allow us to kind of control this and let you kind of think through what your variables are. All right, one of them is polygroups. So if you need a break, you need to use polygroups. So let's unwrap this. Give it 1 sec to do its work, or to crash ZBrush, as the case may be. Okay, so restarting ZBrush. Hmm, 161, 163. Oh, 165 is what I wanted. Lightbox, quick save, 165. And is this our... Yes. Okay, let's take this over again, see if it's going to crash again. UV Master, unwrap. Okay, we're going to flatten. And it looks like it's done a much better job, except in this overlapped area. So this is what we have to solve right now. But it's figured out a lot of stuff by itself. Unflatten. I love that. Let's check if there used to be tools. I'm not sure what they did with them. I'm just looking to see texture map, create. Okay. New from UV check. Cool. Do you see the problem? New from UV check, we can kind of clearly see where the problem is going to be. So it's always a nice, neat, hidden little feature. We don't talk about this a lot. Let's do a new from vertex order. You know, stuff like this. And you see where the white is. You can see it's kind of getting itself all jacked up right in that area. But this is harder to see if you've got like a skin texture, something like that. So what you really want to do is make sure that you're going new from UV check. Crystal clear. If it's red, that means it's overlapping, and that's bad. So that means that we need to start breaking this up into poly groups, right? And so maybe what we do is we just group this bottom part like this. Group visible. Or if we wanted a cleaner approach, we would go move, something like that. And then we would use visibility, hide visibility, polygroup, group visible, and there. A little bit of a problem here. But you can always come in with select lasso. And how do I get inside of this model to select these other little pieces? These annoying little pieces. Sometimes you can flip it. Okay. So now I will group visible, invert, and group visible again. But we still got this little problem right here, so now we got to figure that out. Try to keep this nice and clean. And I'm going to turn double on. Double is on. Then I just need it's tough to get a look at this one. That's what I need. Well, let's just group it. And we need to deselect these. Let's integrate these guys. Click that, group visible. Click the connecting, group visible. And now we can try polygroups and unwrap. Of course, probably save this. I shouldn't have any undo, so that should save quickly. Unwrap. I'm going to wait. Okay. Flatten. Looks better, but let's see. Unflatten. Texture paint and new from UV check. And you gotta look, you know, it's not a guarantee that you're going to be able to see everything. Plus, at this level, you may want to come in and just smooth it, but don't smooth, like, do a big smooth. And look for red. I don't see red. I do see kind of a weird shape there, though. Look at that. I've got this hidden form in there. It comes from the topology right in here is whisked up into the head. That's something I might need to fix, especially if I'm going to 3D print this. But we get the idea. So there are a couple of ways to use UV Master. One of them is enable control paint, and the other one is polygroups. I have found polygroups to be kind of a foolproof way to kind of make that happen. Definitely foolproof. So in this context, UVs, you got to keep in mind you just want to remove all overlap. Stretching, do you have a lot of control over stretching in ZBrush? What do you think? Is there a lot of control over stretching the UVs in ZBrush? Overlap, we've just taken care of. You just polygroup, right? And no, you don't have a lot of control over this overstretching. Not a lot. So stretching is something you have to give up to UV Master, and it's going to work really hard. How about layout? Don't people have to lay out UVs so that they fit into a texture map? Have you seen those texture maps where they're just kind of like this with the little eyeballs in the center and the mouth and the little nostrils and everything flows out? So do you have a lot of control over layout inside of ZBrush? How can you do layout, guys? Preacher says you can use guides, but are guides going to help you get kind of this squarishness in here? You definitely have control over flow, where things are going. Yeah, I would say if you need layout, though, this is going to be one of those things where ZBrush is really just not, it's not really focused on giving you the tools that you need. Let me start recording here. Yeah, layout's not going to be a major tool set for ZBrush. The primary reason is that they're going to be focused on you using Spotlight and things like that to transfer, but whether or not something is diagonal or whether or not it's straight, those aren't really things that are going to be that accessible inside of ZBrush. So in this case, you go to Modo, you go to Max, you go somewhere else to make this kind of happen. And these are, you know, fairly valuable. You want this kind of stuff. But UV Master will try to get things, you know, within an acceptable framework. It will definitely try to do that. So we've talked about, with UVs, we've talked about overlap, stretching, layout, right? And so UVs, if you need more than that, you got to think about other applications. But how do you import UVs? Does anybody know? It's really easy. How do you import UVs? I'm so glad we're covering this. I'm not talking about exporting, as I'm talking about importing from Maya. Uh-oh. So let's take this model. We're going to export it. I'm going to export it as an OBJ, delete. I'm going to go into Maya. Going to import. When I import, this is the older version of Maya. I'm going to make sure create multiple objects is not on. This should be resolved already, though. Shouldn't be something you're continually dealing with. And where did we save it? Okay, R6 and Z projects. Okay, I found it. My pen is not set up with middle click. 1 second. Okay, grip pin and not double click, but I need that back one to be middle click. Okay, hopefully that doesn't screw anything up. There we go. Started to doubt my intelligence. Okay, so we come in here, Windows, and where do they put these things, right? All of this changes, of course. Okay. So we've got these guys here. Let's say UVs to shell. If we just wanted to organize this a little bit differently. And scale this in slightly. Okay. Alright, so good enough for this for now. We've got a slightly different layout. Okay, we're just going to take this model. We're going to export this. Let me throw it over here. We're going to call this delete new. We come back in here, and provided that nothing has changed, you just import it and bring it in. Now GoZ will let you do this as well, but keep in mind all GoZ does is import and export. So, and now if we look at this, we say take new from a UV map. Things have changed. New from UV texture. Alright, so nothing has changed here. All we did was we export the low resolution and we re-import it. But now what happens if something has changed in the model? Let's say, let's undo this and say new from UV map. Okay, so can I undo that import? UV check. There we go. So we're back. We've got the old stuff here. And let's say we've moved hair around. Let's say we're giving this, oh, I don't know, little bit of a clump. And I really want to kind of increase the volume here. And I think I really would like to change direction. That's weird. Let's just make this a minor mod then. That's more likely going to be the case. So we fill this in. If I go in and I import these new UVs, you know what's going to happen, right? Just totally shifted this model. That's the sculpt I want. That's the UVs I want. So how do I deal with this? When the basic shape changes, how do I deal with this? Anybody know? Come on, we're on a cert program. Elizabeth, project all. Preacher, make new UVs. Let's say the changes are small enough that you don't care about the stretching that's going to happen. What you need to do is use morph target. So you store your morph target. You import the new topology. And then you switch. Okay. And then let's check. Did they change anything? I don't know. But no. Now we've got new UVs with the old model, and all we did was use store morph target and switch morph target. So I want to kind of bear down on that a little bit. When you're dealing with topology, there's a lot of things to keep in mind. Now, some of you guys were going to create completely new UVs, but that's not an option sometimes, because a model may, or a model may already be textured, basically. So it has to fit that UV map. You cannot change it, and the director just wants real simple changes, things that don't affect the texture map very much. In this particular case, there are some things affecting it, because it's stretched out. But in other cases, the first thing you want to do is see if you can just deal with morph, right? But when does morph break down? When is morph no longer an option? There's a specific time, very specific thing, in which morph target is no longer going to be an option. Extreme changes, but also if you have topology changes. And by that I mean vert count. And really, this is actually the key. It's when your vert count changes. Because morph is very powerful. It's really, really, really powerful. In fact, let me show you something, in case you guys haven't seen it, because I think sometimes people don't get a chance to see this often enough. I'm looking for the file right now. Where did I put delete and delete new? Okay. Okay, I'm going to open up the OBJ file in a text editor. But then I have to know where the text editor is. So why don't I open a text editor and do this the other way. File open. All files, R6, projects. There we go. It's going to take a little while because it's not a small model. This is an OBJ file. In terms of export, and in terms of really getting control over your program and over this system, this is a good thing to do. Open this up, look inside it to see, you know, what is going on. A lot of numbers, but I just saw groupings. I thought I saw groupings. And also keep in mind that text editor, this text pad, is really a low-level system. Seems like we've changed. I don't know if you caught it. We went from VT to VN. V. There we go. Focus, Ryan. You can do it, Ryan. Let's scroll down. Do we go to UVs? Just looking at numbers right now. You're looking at the matrix as it is. Notice the numbers have changed. So what are these? Also notice you've got some text in here. Delete, 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 group, group. So it seems to be keeping track of groups. And then it switches into this this grouping of 3 numbers. And we keep going. More groupings of 3. More groupings of 3. And that continues. Let's try one more thing. I am going to open up WordPad. So I'm hoping WordPad is going to have better formatting, so you can actually see how the OBJ file is formatted. It's been a while since I looked for WordPad in this computer, and I've been on a Mac for ages. Maybe you can search, Ryan. WordPad. Some of these changes in Windows still blow me away. And I want all files. There we go. Isn't that about 10,000 times easier? Excuse me, a little bit of chai. So WordPad's going to make your life easier. This says vertice. This vertice exists at these XY coordinates. Vertice, these vertices exist, and this vertice exists in this XY and coordinate. V or VT, actually. To be honest with you, I don't know which one. Oh, sorry. It can only be one. So V, V, we have our X, Y, and Z. VN or VT, we're now dealing with what looks like an X and a Y, right? And notice that all of these are what they call, well, let's confirm it, but they look normalized. Does anybody know what normalized means? Anybody know what normalized means? Because all of these numbers are normalized. Stefan has it. What normalized means is no matter where the number, like let's say the highest number is 5 and the lowest number is -5, if you need to normalize those, what do? You divide them by 5. So you take 5 and you shrink that down into 1. -5, you've got to shrink that down as well. So what it says is it'll take every number and fit it within a 0 to 1. That's normalization. You're fitting everything into a 0 to 1. So notice 0.38, 0.09, we've got 0.4, and it's going down the list. And then we are going to get VNs, and we're going to go from there. So that's the last of that. I just want you to see this. This is the information that's being exchanged between ZBrush and Maya. This is the connection. Also, look at these faces. What's a face? This is a face. A face is a vertice, or several vertices. So this is just a group of those vertices that say, hey, this is that face. You are that face. And notice that these groupings are in 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. How many vertices does every polygon face have? Preferably 4. Of course, there are triangles, but preferably 4. Yeah. So this is an OBJ file. This is an inside look into the matrix and how data is stored. All of this is stored in memory for your model. When ZBrush works with it, when Maya works with it, things like that, and then they access it. If you change the vert order, all kinds of crazy things happen, and it's an unsolvable problem. So it's like, how would I say it? You can't, basically, the issue we got to keep in mind is you just can't change vert order. Let's see if we can create that problem, though. Just so you're crystal clear, export, I'm going to import, delete. Oh. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say import, but option box, I'm going to say create multiple objects. And let's import. There we go. Okay, so it's created all these pieces. Now, let's select everything. We're going to export selection or export all. We're going to export it as an OBJ, and we're going to say delete bad. Take this into ZBrush. So we're in ZBrush now. I'm going to delete my morph target, store another one, and I'm just going to import. Okay, a lot of craziness is happening here. So first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that there's no texture on. But obviously that texture is not working, or the UVs are not the same. That's fine because I know why that happened. But really what we want to do is notice that our delete, or our morph target, is essentially gone. So let's undo. There's our morph target. We can switch it out, but now we've imported it, imported the new model, and it has deleted the resolution levels. Or, sorry, it has deleted the morph target. So why did it delete the morph target? Did it delete the morph target? What do you guys think? Do you think it deleted the morph target, or where's that morph target now? This is actually kind of a, it's a small question, but it's kind of important. Preacher has it. Delete morph target is still active. So that means it did not delete the morph target. Now this next thing I'm going to show you, this doesn't get a lot of play and you are almost never going to need this, but there are one or two instances in which case this next piece of information I give you does become valuable. Okay, so morph targets. A morph target, we remember from before, this is just a little bucket. And inside this bucket is all of those zeros and ones and the VTs, the VNs, and the Fs, those faces that we saw from the OBJ file that we opened, not 2 minutes ago. So they're all stored inside that bucket, right? That's what it does. And then you've got your model with her hair and all of that stuff flowing in the wind. You've got your model there, but your model is really just a collection of 0, 1s, VTs, VNs, and faces inside of ZBrush. So they both are basically buckets. They're just groups of information that ZBrush is storing. And a morph target is designed to look towards the model and say, hey, the first thing it checks is like, all right, so we are 1001 vertices. Not polygon faces, but vertices. And if it looks at this model and it sees, oh, this model is 1002 vertices, then it knows instantly that there's not a match. So store, morph target, and switch instantly go out the window. They're just grayed out. You still have the morph target here. That bucket still exists. But until those vertices match, you won't have access to that bucket. It's just completely, gone. Now, let's try something else. Let's try to divide this model. Yeah, there we go. Does anybody know what happened here? Joaquin is asking if you could delete one face to make it work. That's not going to necessarily make it work because the vert count is one thing and the vert order is another, which I'm trying to get myself in that position for. But before we do that, let's look at what's the difference between these two models. Well, one of them is that the model that we imported into Maya, when we imported it, we said create multiple objects. And so that's a multiple object. I can select it and delete it, select it and delete it, select it and delete it, select it and delete it. These are all separate pieces of geometry. They're not connected at all. So that makes them all, how do I say it? That makes it all separate pieces, makes the geometry count very different, and that means that any time that I divide the model, all of these separate pieces of geometry, they shrink. This shrinking is because they are separate shells. So you can see that. Let's see if the, yeah. This is a totally separate piece of geometry. This vertice is not connected to that vertice. These guys move together, but only because my brush is selecting both of them. If I select one and I start to move this, you'll see they're not connected at all. So that right there changes the vert count, because instead of this one dot right here being counted as one vertice, it's actually two vertices that sit right on top of each other. Alright, so that's one problem that we're facing right there. Now let's go back into Maya, right, and see if there's a solution here. So can we combine all of this into one? Where'd they put it? Combine. Did it weld it? hard to say. Do we want to weld it? Extrude, bridge, merge, merge to center. We can say merge all these vertices. Okay, I don't know what kind of problems that will have created, because some of these vertices will have been very close to each other. But let's just take this and see. So export selection, delete, and let's say combined. Come back in here. And I'm just going to import it straight. Okay, so now these are not separated. If I divide this, they don't change. But do I have access to that morph target? No, because the vert count has changed somewhere. Because remember, we merged vertices, so I bet you somewhere hidden there's going to be one vertice that just kind of merged out of its way. So let's undo this, and I'm going to try something different. Let's do as we were talking about. Let's do a weld inside of ZBrush. Geometry, modify topology, and let's say weld points. Weld identical points. So we had some tiny shifts. Did that work? No, it didn't. You get into so much trouble here, and what I'm trying to do is get you into this next phase where you can see that vert order is really important. And when you change vert order, bad things kind of happen. Let me try one more tactic. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to import, but instead of create multiple objects, I'm going to set something else. I'm going to say group. And we're going to do this one. Okay. So that's the original topology. Now let's export this. And we're going to say delete and group, just to see if that setting will reorder the vertices. Voila. But is it fixed? Let's see. Yeah, that setting didn't do anything, the group. So it didn't reorder the vertices. So I don't get to show you that, but basically if your vertices get reordered, what you'll notice is this vertice will pull down here, this vertice will pull up there, this vertice pulls down there, and this vertice pulls up there. And that's a really bad thing. And it is unfixable, as far as I know. There is no way to translate from one model to another that vert order without some kind of supercomputer I'm unaware of. So be mindful of that when you're doing this. If they're pulling and you know, if it just goes to hell in a handbasket when you switch, that means the vert order changed and you have to go back to the app and start over, because your vert order is no longer recognized. That happened in the early days. But now what I want to do is share with you guys one little kind of cool tidbit. So let's delete this morph target. It's about morph targets. And this is the piece of information I thought would be really cool for you guys. I'm going to come up here, and let's say we've stored a morph target, or we've got a high level with some sculpting we like, but for some reason our model, we need to delete the high res of our model. To do something, I don't know what. You can store a morph target of that high res, delete your resolution levels. Oops. You can even go down to the lowest resolution levels, delete higher, right? And notice that that morph target is still there. So if I've got to make some kind of change at this low level, if there was some reason I had to delete that higher level, all I have to do is divide the model back to that subdivision level, and that bucket is still there. So keep that in mind. Even though you have deleted resolution levels, your morph target is still there. And as soon as the vert count is the same, then it will allow you to access that morph target. And that's kind of important as well because you're going to be dealing with extra geometry at that point, right? Remember, morph targets add to the file size. This is a cool little trick we did a while ago and learned a little while ago. Ofer just likes the that little extra level of complexity. I doubt that this is going to change. That morph target, they're unlikely to rewrite much of that. That's all old school. Okay, so we looked at modifying the topology there. What else is it that we have to deal with? So we've got maps, topo, and UVs. Okay, we looked a little bit at UVs and how to kind of deal with that. In terms of topo, we looked at morph, and now what we're going to be looking at, what we're talking about, is projection or transfer. How do you transfer one model to another model so that you can get maps out that kind of work? This is going to be something that we have to deal with. So let's see, do we have a particular scenario that would work? Yeah. Let's take this model. Subtools. Okay. All right. I am going to clone this. So it is its own, and I'm going to start to z-remesh this. I'm going to z-remesh this again, but this time I'm going to use guides. Okay, let's just see if this is going to do anything. Alright, we got a little bit of better topology around the eyes. That mouth is still kind of not a happy mouth. That's a kind of on the Joker side. And probably to do better than that, we might need to take that high res. So let's try the high res, a higher res. Okay, and I'm going to clone that. And just going to delete things. Okay, z-remesh, we're going to go half and z-remesh. Okay, just waiting. The screen has stopped, which means it's just stopped updating, but it's still functioning. And ZRemesher does have problems with higher res models. You just have to keep that in mind. This size is not a big issue though. It's just a time issue. And yes, Joaquin is saying unless you decimate. So decimate's a really good way around this time. I'm looking at the ZRemesh process right now, and it's at 12%, 13%, and it's changing its memory so that it's working. And ZRemesh is a process. I'm looking at it off screen right now. Should be fine. No crashing at this point, 12 and 13. ZRemesh is just a totally separate application. It's probably even coded in C++. So it could essentially be another software application like ZBrush. It's increasing its memory usage. And how much more? Coffee break, right? We had our coffee break when we started a little late. What are you talking about? This is a Zen meditation break. Okay. Aborted. Let's work with the one that we've got. And that new topology. So we've got this new topology. How are we going to transfer this over to this model? So there's several ways to do it, of course, and what I want to do right now is just walk you through logically the different processes, the different procedures, so you get a sense of things. So let's be really clear what we're talking about right now. We're talking about projection, topology modification. Okay, and then really what I want to do is set you up with your expectations inside of ZBrush. So keep in mind that the primary thing here is not it is not to get 100%. Okay, so there's various tools, and you want the automatic tools to do 80% of the work. Not 100% of the work. Keep that in mind. Your automatic tools are getting better, but you don't want to rely on them to do everything. Expect when you do this to resculpt some portions of it. So we're going to go, I think we're going to go the easy route first, which is first we're going to do full automatic mode. Okay, and then we're going to start to look at subtools, and then we're going to start to look at brushes. So the first thing you want is for this to be super, super easy. Really easy. So then you just take this model, let's just export this, and delete. Let's just call it delete 5. Okay. Now we're going to come in here and we're going to say at this, with these subdivision levels active, we're going to import delete 5. And you get this warning. Hey, things have transferred or have changed. Transfer high resolution details. This is the automatic solution. If I press no, then it deletes all my higher levels. That's not what I want. I want it to do the projection for me. So this does take time, and we do want to wait for it. So you can see the results because they're different for every one. This might be your coffee break, preacher. I can hear my computer spinning up. Let's just give it the time it needs, and then we'll go from there. There we go. All done. So we missed a few places. Does anybody know why we missed these places? Also, anybody know why the model is dark? Why is the model dark? And why did we miss the area in the nose and in the eyes? Yeah, number one, it is masked, so keep that in mind. And then, what is up with this? Have you seen in the project button, have you seen this distance slider? Yeah, so as Preacher Alvaro and Elizabeth say, this is really distance, but we didn't set distance when we imported it. It happened automatically. So let's take a look, if we can, at the original topology that we imported versus that original nose. You can see it, although it's a little hard, but let's say right there. I'm going to put my hand on the screen. Okay. So this much of the nose was missing. And in a nose, that's going to be kind of a big problem. And then also, if we look at this, see how that's fairly straightforward. If we kind of come in here, you can see it really dives in right there. So that's all that's happening, is you're missing those. So are we going to, or how are we going to get that back? Are you going to resculpt? Or do we have to do some sort of new projection? Well, we've still got the model. I don't think I changed the nose, although I did change the eye. So we can make that other models, the other subtool active. So we've got an old sculpt, we've got the new topology, they're active, and then I'm going to come in here and use this Z project brush. Okay, and I'm going to press Alt, and then I'm going to go into solo mode and check. Voila. But we're having some problems here on the side. So this is something you got to be a bit careful of. Try not to make your draw size too large. And I'm pressing Alt to pull. Smooth and Alt. You want to think about smooth and using this in combination with each other and really small strokes. But sadly your brush does have to be a certain size. So then you can kind of smooth it out once you get it up there and then do it again. Careful of doing stuff on the side though. And there you go. Now in this particular case, it's a little bit different because I actually changed the sculpt there. So in this case, I'm going to smooth that out and resculpt because the original's, it's not quite the same. And resculpting is not that hard. Should never be afraid of resculpting. Because sometimes it's just crazy fast and easier. Nose transferred okay, I think. We can do a little bit more resculpting, kind of touch it up, always touch it up. But in this case, the brush worked. Z project, because it's really a spot fix for us. And then what Z project can't do easily, you resculpt. Now, why can't we just use a morph target? Looks like the polygon count was the same. Well, you can't use the morph target, one, because it creates a morph target. But really, the key reason you can't use a morph target is because the vert order is different. So does anybody know what it's done here? What are we looking at? What is this model, which is created for us, and then this one? So when you project, or when you import basically, what ZBrush does is it takes that low res and then it simply divides it. In this case it divided it 5 times because we had 5 subdivision levels. And that makes for a very smooth high res model. So in case the projection goes to hell in a handbasket, you can always come over here to switch and then just use Z project in areas to kind of project what you want. Worst case scenario, if that was to happen. You can also do something else. Maybe the projection worked in some spots, but not in others. What can you do? Well, what do you know? There's a morph brush, right? So you can say, oh, well, I think, let's try. Let's just bring a little bit of it back. maybe I can resculpt the rest, right? Pretty cool. Morph brush, morphs, they give you a lot of power to kind of work there. And don't underestimate them. Definitely keep them around, you know, in your kind of your toolbox. Okay, any questions about what we've done so far? Let me just summarize. So maps, topo, UVs. We looked at some options for UVs and to fix these. We looked at topo, some of these options and some of the ways to be thinking about things and projections. And then now the next thing that we've got to deal with is maps. For that, I'm going to zoom back in history here. Check my new from UV check. Oops. And I've lost all my undos. Let's import, let's say delete new, I think had some. No! What's changed? It's possible that it completely got rid of my undo history on that model. So let's just load this again. Quick save, and I want 65. Let's check the map. It's got no UVs. So import. Oh, that's the wrong one. Yeah, that's the problem one. It's dynameshing, I think. Okay, back to this one. UV map, morph UVs. And then we were at what? This one? Come on. Much better. Okay. I'm going to come up here to UV master, and let's see. I'm going to copy those UVs. I'm going to go back into this one, and then I'm going to paste those UVs. Wow. Did we change the topology somewhere? Maybe my resolution level's not the same? Okay. Let's work with this. So let's just talk a little bit about the maps, and we'll have that overlap there as a problem. Now make sure that you are looking at the lectures, because those are going to have a lot more information for some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about. But in terms of maps, you should always be able to get a map and see something. So in this case, you should always be able to see this. If you can't see this, then you've got to think about your UVs. You've got to look at your UVs to see what's potentially a problem, and where you might need to make some changes. But let's talk a little bit about some of the core things of adaptive versus DP subpix. This is kind of really important. So I'm going to turn adaptive on, and then I'm going to create that displacement map again. Adaptive is really a significant thing. Why is it projecting? It's possible it's active, Preacher. I'll look here in a second. It should respond to escape, though. I'm not confident on why that took that long. But we have a map. Let's talk about these modes real quick. You'll see some of the lectures there, but we have these two choices: adaptive, DP subpix, DP subpix. Okay, these involve what's called the limit surface, which we'll do in green, and then the real surface, which is in red. Who knows what the limit surface is? Anybody know? Limit surface? The limit surface is the low res smoothed out, basically. This is what the limit surface is, what Maya is going to read and use. And so your map needs to kind of have a very dense limit surface to be able to capture all the ups and downs. So the limit surface is basically where all your vertices are. Now DP subpix, let's say your low res is as dense as these points. If you have a DP subpix of 0, then you're only going to cast rays out from these points. If you have a DP subpix of 2, then suddenly you start to get more divisions. And then things get to increase exponentially from there as every face gets more and more. And then this gives you more rays for casting, and hence more accuracy. DP subpix, you start to increase that, you get more accuracy in your map, but it's very time intensive. And in some cases, you don't need a lot of rays. Like in this area right here, there's not a lot of change. Adaptive will look and it will say, like right here, we don't need to cast a lot of rays. We'll be able to figure that out. But in this area, we've got to go boom, 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 boom. We need a lot of rays. So adaptive will go in and say, spend more time here, spend less time here. And that's generally what you want. But also keep in mind smooth UVs. This is really important. Flip V is also something. But also, a lot of this is also in multi-map exporter, something to consider. Check out your export options, load presets. Let's cancel here. This will give you a chance to save exactly what you're doing. So you'd go in displacement mapping and you'd say, I want it to be adaptive, I want it to be smooth, and I want you to use a 3-bit, 32, 3-channel, and go from there. You can also, with the multi-map exporter, you can actually get the scale. This is something that's kind of new and cool. So it's adjusted the scale and the intensity already, and these give us preset numbers to kind of plug into Maya, Max, rest in peace, XSI. 3 channels is RGB. So ZBrush by default, when it generates these maps, let's just take this map and I'll say clone it, which throws it over here to alpha, and then from alpha we export it. If you were to look at this map inside of Photoshop, you'll see this map is actually just one channel of information, not 3 channels. It'll just be grayscale information. Let's let Photoshop start. You can also do 3-bit or 3-channel here, and you can do 32-bit here, but notice that I don't have really, well, it gets scale for me after you've done the map. But notice that I don't have the exact same ability here to get scale and intensity, because these numbers are actually really important when you get into Maya, as you'll see when you look at the lectures. This get scale for 16-bit, can't be overrated. If you're in 32-bit, you don't need scale. But 32-bit, as you'll see, is actually very expensive. It's very expensive at the computation time. So let's come in here and open this up. And we're going to go computer. And I need that map. There you go. Grayscale, you see up here at the top it says grayscale 16-bit. We come in here, we generate it at a 3-channel, create displacement map, and now suddenly what you're going to see is a model, one of these guys that is now in RGB color. And so you have multiple channels like this. The grayscale, if I remember right, it has some problems being red in some applications. Like Maya likes you to use a red, green, and blue. But what's the problem with a red, green, and blue? Anybody know? What's the problem with using red, green, and blue? How different are these? Not very different, are they? They're identical. So you've got 3 pieces of information. It's basically a lot of redundancy. All you need is the red channel, or all you need is a grayscale channel. That's all you really need. But in Maya and some other applications, that's just not the way. That's not the way they like to read the information right off the bat. Okay, anything else I can show you guys about this? Yeah, this multi-map export is a great one for you to kind of look at. It's been updated, so it's quite powerful. But if you're not getting maps, it has to do with your UVs, or it has to do with something else with your topology, and that's where I would definitely give us a call. See if we can help you work through that. Now, if you're going to export a 32-bit map, you have to create and export the map. You can't create the map inside of ZBrush. Okay, so now it's going to go through its process and create this again, and then we're going to watch this and then call it a day. But in essence, ZBrush does not read 32-bit maps through that alpha channel, so you can't kind of keep them. You can't keep that inside of ZBrush per se. That should change, but it's not for now. So gather up your questions, guys. We're getting ready to close things out. But don't forget, this is not the end of our time together. You are now part of family, so you are part of all the upgrades and everything else that we add to this course. And it'll get an update for R7, and it's going to get an update for 5. We're waiting here, and we're waiting for ZBrush to export this so I can show you in Photoshop. And then I am waiting for your questions. And let me know, can you hear me okay? Because it's processing quite strong. Sometimes that screws up my audio. Okay. All right, Preacher's asking, when do you need a 32-bit map? Okay, let me answer that here in just a sec, Preacher. Displacement map exported successfully. Would you like to also export the base mesh? That's very kind of them. I'm going to say no, because I just want to show you this. Okay, so one thing to know is that it saved this as a 32-bit TIFF. And it's asking me what kind of profile I want to use. So working profile or assign another profile. Check it out. Where is it? 32-bit is just an infinite amount of information. A ton of information. So much information that it's more than we can see. I know that sounds like kind of crazy, but this is kind of important to keep in mind. Like, look at that. You see everything here. But if you think about the real world, if I'm 5 feet away from somebody, I don't see their pores in the same way as I do when I am, 6 inches away from them or 1 inch away from them. I just don't see it. I wouldn't see it. But if I zoom in closer, I'm going to see pores. And if I get down to a microscopic level, I'm going to see pores. That information is here. It's within this stuff. But we have to adjust our gamma so our eyes can see it. This is tough. I'm going to leave it right here. And I'm going to just kind of add a contrast node if I can. It's not a guarantee that I can. Levels. Okay. There we go. So I am forcing this into a spectrum that my eyes can view. But the reason we use 32-bit is because it maintains just an infinite amount of information. Just a crazy amount of information. It will maintain whether or not this particular dot is, let's say, 1 mile back in space, and that little white spot on the nose, that's going to be 5 miles. Let's say this is into the Earth to give it perspective, and this is out into space. Only 5 miles out into space. 5,000 miles out into space. It's going to, ideally, I'm exaggerating right now, but ideally it's going to contain this incredible distance that the map is. And so that's why its white and black values are farther apart than you and I can see, because technically we would need to be able to see, that far out into space to be able to kind of look at it from a distance. What's the problem with this? I mean, it's cool, you can see it, you can get all of that, but what's the problem with this? Anybody know? One of the problems you can see right here. PSD is 8 megabytes. That TIFF is 50 megabytes. So that's a scale of what? 5 times? So what does that tell you? That tells you it's 5 times more expensive. So what does that tell you? If you're working on a feature film where it already takes your model 1 day, or a scene 1 day, or 2 days, or a week to render, if you're going to make that 5 times more expensive, this portion of it anyways, and let's say you double the render time from 5 days for a frame to 10 days for a frame, you're talking about money. You're not just talking about data size. You're talking about money. Staff, time processing, rent for the computers, the server space, how long it's going to take to get a film to theater where it can start to generate revenue. Or in our case, you're talking about a lot of late nights, watching renders that then crash, go from there, and so it's a lot of your time and your money as well. And when's the last time you had a displacement map render something that was 1 mile underground and 10,000 miles out into space? When was the last time you had a displacement map do that? Kind of never. So keep that in mind. 32 bits like it makes everything so nice, and so if you can afford it, do it. But 16-bit is quicker to process, faster to render, and you don't really need it for doing pores and things like that. But keep it in mind, because you may, if you're dealing with certain variables, you might need a 32-bit, but you're going to make the decision to go back and forth between these. And when you watch the lectures, you'll see there's a whole process for getting 16-bit on to match up. 32-bit is easier, but it is expensive. And we can post. Joaquim and Preacher mentioned some notes. So Joaquim's saying it took 3 hours to render 1 frame of a clay render in Max. Was that with a 32-bit map? And Preacher, yeah, 32-bit. But even with the prime time, 32-bit gets really expensive. So a lot of times what you'll see people do is let's say you have a model. Let's just say some kind of portrait. Right here at the edges where it's green, they will start to turn things off. And they'll only do a displacement, or they'll do normal maps here, so they're fast to render. So this is a normal map. And then where they need things to push out, this is where they render displacement maps. And so they use the contour of it to choose between the two. And that means that the displacement map doesn't do what a normal map can do, because a normal map will do it much faster. But the normal map doesn't do what a displacement can, which is the edge and the silhouette. So they start to split things up like that. But anyways, the key thing, and this is the last thing I'm going to mention to you, is when you're doing this, you really want to be an explorer, not an artist. You want to be happy exploring. And I've probably mentioned the story already, but there was a friend of mine who spent 2 weeks knuckled down with RenderMan trying to figure out why his renders were creating seams from ZBrush into RenderMan. And it all boiled down to the Smooth UV button. One button that seems so innocent and small. So keep that in mind. Really get in, explore, try all kinds of settings. Do not think of yourself as an artist when you're doing this. Think of yourself as a scientist, and you have to create 50,000 variations of experiments to make this kind of work. And then try those all out, and then, see which ones give you better results. There are, of course, pipeline guides for it and stuff like that, and you do want to find the solid information. But I just want you to be aware that you definitely need to be mindful of all the settings and experiment with things. All right, guys, let's call it a day. Any last questions before we go? Let me know. Email me. Stay in touch. I'll let you know when the next iteration is coming out. We're working on some cool updates to the platform too, so keep those in mind. Thanks, Laszlo. Thanks, Preacher. Thanks, Raven. Aaron, there really needs to be... Aaron is asking, are there any classes that focus primarily on extracting maps? And I've had a problem with those types of classes before because they're not sexy, so not a lot of people sign up for them. And UArtsy is not really designed to be like a tutorial library, so they haven't had a really solid place. But I do think that is that's one of the changes we're working on. So I do see that a project coming up that could do that. So that would be really neat, I think. Thanks, Joaquin. Really appreciate that. Thanks, Renato. And I will see you guys, as Renato says, with ZBrush 4 R7. When that beast gets released, keep an eye on UArtsy and some of the things that we'll do to kind of get the word out. I wish you luck with all your ZBrush endeavors. The tests are going to come next week, not this week, next week. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Ellen. See you, Simon, Mauricio. See you, Alvaro. Have fun, guys. Have a great weekend. We should create a Facebook group. What do you think? A CERT program Facebook group. That could be really neat. Keep the conversation going over there. Probably just keep it open too. I'm not a big one on censorship. It's very expensive to moderate. That's one of the problems with Facebook groups. Moderation is not easy. So we have to be mindful of that. I've had Facebook groups for that we take part in that share pirated courses of ours. It's like, what are you thinking, guys? Ellen, tell me about Google Plus. What do you see connecting there? It's making Google Plus is making quite a splash. I think you have something there, something better than the Facebook group idea. If you don't mind, I'd love it. Send me an email. Tell me how you're using it, because we're actually evaluating Google Plus right now. We do almost nothing, but I find it in a couple of courses I'm doing online. I find it pretty amazingly awesome. Just stunning, actually. So please send me an email, Ryan at ZBrush Workshops, and I'd love to hear how you're using it, because I think that is a better option than a Facebook group. All right, guys, anything else? Have a great weekend. I will talk to you later. I'll get these up as soon as possible.